The single word echoed through the magnificent Grand Monarch Ballroom. More than 300 guests fell silent. Every head turned toward the man standing alone near the center of the room. He wore an old charcoal gray suit. Nothing about him looked expensive. Nothing about him looked important. Richard Holloway, the powerful CEO of Kingsley Global, pointed directly at him. "Remove this man immediately." Soft laughter spread across the ballroom. Daniel Carter didn't argue. He didn't defend himself. He simply looked toward the grand entrance. And smiled. Less than 30 seconds later. No one in that ballroom would ever laugh at him again. Before we continue, if you love stories that reveal the true character of people, subscribe today and become one of our story keepers. Every comment, every opinion, and every lesson shared here helps this community grow stronger. Now here's my question for you. If someone publicly humiliated the person you loved just because of the clothes they were wearing, what would you do? Share your answer in the comments. I read every one of them. Now, let me tell you what really happened that unforgettable night. My name is Daniel Carter. For most of my life, people judged me before they ever spoke to me. Sometimes it was because of my old pickup truck. Sometimes because of my worn-out shoes. But most of the time, it was because I never felt the need to prove anything to anyone. My father used to tell me, the loudest man in the room usually has the least to say. Back then, I didn't understand what he meant. Now I do. Because 2 nights ago, I walked into one of the most exclusive charity galas in New York City wearing a suit I'd owned for nearly 10 years. Before the evening was over, the same people laughing at me would be standing in complete silence. But if I tell you only what happened that night, you'll never understand why it mattered. To understand that, we have to go back 48 hours. Rain tapped softly against the windows of our apartment overlooking the Hudson River. It wasn't a luxury penthouse. It wasn't even a fashionable address. Just a quiet 2-bedroom apartment in an old brick building that had been my home long before anyone knew my name. The smell of freshly brewed coffee drifted through the kitchen as I stood by the stove making breakfast. Eggs. Toast. Coffee. Simple. The kind of morning I had always loved. Emily rushed past me without looking up from her phone. She wore a navy business suit that probably cost more than every piece of clothing hanging in my closet combined. She looked beautiful. Professional. Confident. Always in a hurry. "Morning," I said with a smile. She answered with nothing more than a distracted hum while reading another email. I placed her coffee beside her exactly the way she liked it, 1 spoon of sugar and just a splash of oat milk. She didn't even notice. She never forgot an important meeting. She never forgot a deadline. But lately, she seemed to forget the little things. Like saying thank you. Or smiling at me. Or asking how my day had been. It hadn't always been like that. Rain tapped softly against the windows of our apartment overlooking the Hudson River. It wasn't a luxury penthouse. It wasn't even a fashionable address. Just a quiet 2-bedroom apartment in an old brick building that had been my home long before anyone knew my name. The smell of freshly brewed coffee drifted through the kitchen as I stood by the stove making breakfast. Eggs. Toast. Coffee. Simple. The kind of morning I had always loved. Emily rushed past me without looking up from her phone. She wore a navy business suit that probably cost more than every piece of clothing hanging in my closet combined. She looked beautiful. Professional. Confident. Always in a hurry. "Morning," I said with a smile. She answered with nothing more than a distracted hum while reading another email. I placed her coffee beside her exactly the way she liked it, 1 spoon of sugar and just a splash of oat milk. She didn't even notice. She never forgot an important meeting. She never forgot a deadline. But lately, she seemed to forget the little things. Like saying thank you. Or smiling at me. Or asking how my day had been. It hadn't always been like that. When Emily and I met 11 years earlier, neither of us had much money. We rented a tiny apartment where the heater worked only when it felt like it, and every Friday night we celebrated by sharing a single pepperoni pizza while watching old movies on a second-hand television. Back then, she used to laugh at everything. Even my terrible jokes. Especially my terrible jokes. She once told me she loved that I could make an ordinary day feel extraordinary. I believed her. Maybe she believed it too. Life was simpler then. Success wasn't measured by job titles, or luxury cars, or expensive watches. We measured it by whether we could pay rent before the first of the month, by whether we had enough left to buy dessert, by whether we could still laugh after another difficult week. Somewhere along the road, those things stopped being enough for her. It didn't happen overnight. People like to think relationships fall apart because of one dramatic argument. They rarely do. Most marriages don't collapse in a single day. They erode. One disappointment at a time. One ignored conversation at a time. One unspoken apology at a time. Looking back now, I can see the exact moment everything began to change. It started the day Emily was promoted to Senior Vice President at Kingsley Global. I still remember how excited she was when she walked through our front door carrying a bottle of champagne. "I did it," she shouted before I even had time to stand up. I wrapped my arms around her and spun her around our tiny living room. "I knew you would." "No," she laughed, tears filling her eyes. "You believed it before I did." We danced barefoot across the hardwood floor that night. There was no orchestra. No fancy restaurant. Just an old Bluetooth speaker playing our favorite song. It remains one of the happiest memories of my life. But promotions don't only change salaries. Sometimes they change people. The following months brought longer hours. Business dinners. Networking events. Weekend conferences. Luxury hotels. Private clubs. Conversations filled with words like influence, prestige, image, and status. Slowly, our worlds began moving in different directions. Emily started buying clothes from designers whose names I couldn't pronounce. She traded her reliable sedan for a luxury European SUV. She became friends with executives who discussed million-dollar deals over expensive wine as casually as we once talked about grocery lists. I was genuinely happy for her. Success had never frightened me. What frightened me was watching kindness slowly disappear behind ambition. One evening, as we prepared for another company event, she looked at the navy blazer I had worn for years and frowned. "Daniel." I looked up from tying my tie. "Yeah. Don't you think it's time you bought something new?" I smiled. "This one still fits." "That's not what I mean." She hesitated before speaking again. "My colleagues notice these things." I laughed softly. "I didn't know my jacket had become part of your performance review." She didn't laugh back. "It's not funny." There was something in her voice I'd never heard before. Embarrassment. Not because of herself. Because of me. I tried to lighten the mood. "So, my old jacket is the biggest crisis in Manhattan." She sighed. "You don't understand." "No," I admitted quietly. "I don't." She picked up her purse. "Image matters." The apartment fell silent after the door closed behind her. Image matters. I stood alone in the kitchen repeating those two words. Maybe she was right. Maybe image did matter. But I couldn't stop wondering. When had appearance become more valuable than character? That question stayed with me longer than I expected. And 2 days later, I would finally learn the answer. It was just after 7 that evening when Emily came home carrying a thick ivory envelope embossed with gold lettering. She placed it carefully on the dining table, almost as if it were something sacred. For the first time in weeks, she smiled. Not at me. At the envelope. I walked over, curious. "What is it?" She looked up, her eyes shining with excitement. The invitation finally came. She slid the envelope toward me. Across the front, elegant gold letters read, "The Kingsley Foundation Annual Charity Gala. The most exclusive corporate event in New York. Attendance by invitation only." I looked back at her and smiled. "Congratulations." She nodded proudly. Only the top executives were invited. She paused. And she hesitated just long enough for me to notice. "They said I can bring one guest." She looked at me. For a brief moment, I saw uncertainty in her eyes. As if she were silently asking herself a question she never wanted to ask. Should I bring my husband? Or protect my image? I smiled before she had to answer. I'd love to go with you. She forced a smile. Of course. But something in her expression told me she had already begun regretting those words. And I had no idea that accepting that invitation would change both of our lives forever. The following evening arrived faster than I expected. New York was wrapped in the warm glow of a summer sunset, and from our apartment window the skyline looked almost peaceful. For a few quiet minutes, it was easy to forget how quickly people could change once they stepped into a room filled with power. Emily had already laid 3 evening gowns across our bed. She stood in front of the mirror, holding one dress against herself before shaking her head and reaching for another. No. She sighed. This one is too formal. A few moments later she rejected the second. The color won't work under the ballroom lights. Then the third. I wore this to last year's awards dinner. I watched her with a gentle smile. You'll look beautiful in any of them. She glanced at me through the mirror. I appreciate that. She paused. But that's not how these events work. I nodded slowly. No. She placed the dresses back on the bed. People notice everything. I didn't answer. Because I already knew. They noticed watches. Shoes. Jewelry. Cars. Job titles. Everything except the things that actually mattered. While Emily continued deciding between gowns, I walked toward my closet. Inside hung only a handful of jackets. Most of them were years old. I reached for my favorite charcoal gray suit. The same one I had worn to weddings. Funerals. Job interviews. Anniversaries. It wasn't expensive. But it had been with me through every important chapter of my life. As I carefully brushed invisible dust from the shoulders, Emily turned around. You're not wearing that. It wasn't a question. I looked down at the suit. I was planning to. She closed her eyes for a second. Daniel. It's clean. I know. It fits. I know. It still looks good. She let out a slow breath. That's not the point. I smiled softly. Then what is? She hesitated. Long enough for honesty to wrestle with pride. Finally she whispered. Everyone at the gala wears custom-tailored suits. I laughed quietly. I guess they'll have something interesting to look at, then. She didn't smile. Instead, she walked toward me. Her fingers gently touched the sleeve of my jacket. This suit. She searched for the right words. Makes people ask questions. What kind of questions? She looked away. They'll wonder why a senior executive's husband dresses like. She stopped herself. Like what? Like someone who couldn't afford better. The apartment became painfully quiet. For the first time in years. Her words hurt. Not because she criticized my clothes. Because she believed other people's opinions mattered more than my dignity. I slowly placed the jacket back on its hanger. If you'd rather go alone. She interrupted immediately. No. Too quickly. Almost defensively. I already told everyone you were coming. Not. I want you there. Not. I'd be proud to have you beside me. Only. I already told everyone. There was a difference. A painful one. I forced a smile. Then I'll be there. She nodded, relieved that the conversation was over. But for me, it had only just begun. The next morning, I left the apartment before sunrise. Emily was still asleep. I quietly placed a handwritten note beside the coffee machine. Good luck today. You'll do great. No signature. She would know it was from me. Outside, Manhattan was only beginning to wake up. Coffee shops were opening. Delivery trucks lined the streets. Joggers crossed Central Park beneath a sky painted in soft shades of orange and blue. I walked several blocks before stopping in front of a modest neighborhood diner. The waitress smiled the moment she saw me. "Morning, Daniel." "Morning, Martha." "The usual. You know me too well." She laughed. "I've been serving you breakfast every Thursday for almost 8 years." She poured coffee into my mug before I even sat down. "Big day." "You could say that." She noticed the garment bag folded neatly over my shoulder. "Fancy event?" "My wife's company gala." Martha smiled warmly. She must be proud. I looked into my coffee for a moment before answering. "I hope so." Before she could respond, the bell above the diner's entrance chimed. An elderly man walked inside wearing a simple brown coat despite the summer weather. His white hair was neatly combed. His posture remained remarkably straight for someone his age. Every Thursday, he arrived at exactly the same time. Without fail. Martha smiled. "Your friend is here." The old man spotted me immediately. "There you are." His voice carried the calm confidence of someone who had lived through enough storms to fear none of them. He slid into the booth across from me. "Good morning, Arthur." Arthur Bennett wasn't wealthy by appearance. He drove an old sedan. He wore inexpensive clothes. Most people would have mistaken him for a retired schoolteacher. In many ways, that was exactly how he preferred it. He picked up the menu despite ordering the same breakfast every week. "Let me guess," he said. "You've got that look again." "What look?" "The one that says you're about to carry the weight of somebody else's expectations." I smiled. "You always notice." "I've had plenty of practice." For a moment, neither of us spoke. Then Arthur leaned back and studied me carefully. "You still planning to attend that gala tonight?" I promised Emily. "And are you going as Daniel Carter?" He tilted his head slightly. "Or as someone else?" I understood the question immediately. There were two versions of my life. One that almost everyone knew. And another, known by only a handful of people. I stirred my coffee slowly. "I'm going as her husband." Arthur nodded. "And if things go badly?" I smiled. "They usually do before they get better." The old man chuckled quietly. "I've missed that optimism." Then his expression became serious. "Just remember one thing." "What?" "The easiest way to discover a person's character." He paused just long enough for his words to settle. "Is to give them an opportunity to underestimate you." I couldn't help smiling. "You've told me that before." "I know. And every time." He pointed gently toward my chest. "It proves true." Outside the diner, a black luxury sedan rolled silently past the window before disappearing around the corner. Neither Arthur nor I paid it any attention. We had no idea. Someone inside that car had been looking directly at our table. And before the day was over, that silent glance would become far more important than either of us could possibly imagine. Arthur finished his coffee, folded his napkin with the same precision he seemed to apply to everything in life, and slowly rose from the booth. "I should get going." I stood as well. "It was good seeing you." He smiled. "It always is." As we stepped outside, the morning air carried the familiar sounds of Manhattan waking up. Taxi horns echoed between skyscrapers, cyclists weaved through traffic, and pedestrians hurried along the sidewalks as though every second had a price. Arthur adjusted the collar of his old brown coat. "Remember, Daniel." "I know." He smiled knowingly. "Do you?" I laughed. "I'll try." He placed a reassuring hand on my shoulder. "No matter what happens tonight, don't let other people's opinions decide who you are." With that, he walked away, disappearing into the crowd as though he were just another ordinary old man. Most people would never have looked at him twice. That was exactly how he liked it. I watched until he vanished around the corner before climbing into my aging pickup truck. The engine coughed twice before finally starting. I smiled. "One of these days," I muttered, patting the dashboard, "you're going to make me walk." The old truck answered with another stubborn rattle. Despite everything, I loved that truck. It had carried me through some of the hardest years of my life. It reminded me where I'd started. And I had never wanted to forget that. Around noon, my phone vibrated. Emily. I answered immediately. Hey. Daniel. She sounded distracted. I just wanted to remind you. The gala starts at 7. I know. There was a brief silence. Then she cleared her throat. Could you, maybe meet me there instead of us arriving together? The question caught me off guard. I thought we were driving together. I know. Another pause. It's just. Our executives usually arrive separately. I frowned. I've never heard of that. It's company culture. I didn't believe her. Not for a second. But I also knew she was trying to spare my feelings. Or perhaps she was trying to protect her own image. If that's what you want, I replied quietly. Relief slipped into her voice almost instantly. Thank you. I'll see you there. See you tonight. The call ended. I stared at the phone for several seconds before sliding it back into my pocket. She hadn't lied very well. She had simply hoped I wouldn't notice. Across the city, Emily sat inside her glass-walled office overlooking Midtown Manhattan. She leaned back in her chair, letting out a slow breath. A knock interrupted her thoughts. Come in. Her colleague, Vanessa, stepped inside carrying 2 garment bags. There you are. Vanessa smiled. I brought the dresses. Emily thanked her as they laid both gowns across the office sofa. Vanessa noticed Emily wasn't smiling. What's wrong? Emily hesitated. Nothing. Vanessa raised an eyebrow. That's not your nothing face. Emily looked toward the enormous windows. I'm bringing Daniel tonight. Vanessa's smile faded slightly. Oh. You've met him. Once. What did you think? Vanessa chose her words carefully. He seems nice. Emily laughed without humor. That's exactly the problem. What do you mean? Everyone else brings husbands who own companies, hedge funds, law firms. She sighed. And mine still drives that old pickup. Vanessa remained silent. Emily continued. I know it sounds terrible. It does. Emily looked at her in surprise. Vanessa crossed her arms. But not for the reason you think. Emily frowned. I've watched Daniel pick you up after work. So. I've watched him wait 45 minutes in the rain because your meeting ran late. Emily said nothing. I've watched him carry your shoes when your feet hurt. Still nothing. I've watched him remember every birthday in your family. Emily lowered her eyes. Vanessa's voice softened. I've also watched men wearing $10,000 suits ignore their wives all night. The office became quiet. You know what I think? Emily looked up. I think you're so busy worrying about how people see Daniel that you've stopped seeing him yourself. Emily forced a smile. You make it sound worse than it is. Vanessa picked up one of the gowns. I hope you're right. But something in her expression suggested she wasn't convinced. By late afternoon, the Grand Monarch Hotel had transformed into a fortress of elegance. Luxury vehicles lined the entrance. Photographers waited behind velvet ropes. News reporters adjusted microphones while camera crews prepared for the arrival of New York's most influential guests. Inside, hundreds of employees moved with military precision. Floral arrangements were inspected. Crystal glasses polished. Golden place cards aligned to perfection. Every detail mattered. At exactly 5 o'clock, Richard Holloway entered the ballroom. He slowly surveyed the room with the satisfaction of a man who believed success belonged only to those willing to display it. Everything ready? He asked. Yes, sir. The press. Already outside. The chairman. He confirmed his attendance. Richard smiled proudly. Excellent. Tonight wasn't just about charity. It was about influence. About reminding everyone who controlled Kingsley Global. He had spent months preparing for this evening. He intended to leave as the undisputed face of the company. As he adjusted his cufflinks, his assistant approached once more. Sir. Richard looked up. There's one more item. What is it? The guest list. What about it? She hesitated. It appears Mrs. Emily Carter registered her husband as her +1. Richard barely glanced at the name. Daniel Carter. He shrugged. Never heard of him. He handed the list back. Doesn't matter. Then, with a confident smile, he added the words that would haunt him before the night was over. By tomorrow morning, everyone in this city will remember my name. He had no idea. There was another name on that guest list. A name that would change everything. To be continued.